the terms of the agreement, and he left the Ir Miklat. So now, also we're going to see also in the Gemara, that's only if the guy intentionally left the Ir Miklat. If the guy unintentionally left the Ir Miklat, then you wouldn't be able. If the guy, we'll see in the Gemara, there's a Mandiyama the Gemara that says if a guy intentionally left the Ir Miklat, and someone he killed him, then the Goel Hadam would have to go to court. So the allowance of the Torah for the Goel Hadam, for that relative to kill the Rotzeach, was given when the guy violated his terms, and maybe the allowance is to ensure that the guy is not going to leave. Maybe it's not so much that the Torah is saying that this guy, it's like the guy, we want the guy to be killed. Giving the right to kill him is going to deter the guy from leaving the exile. So your question is, so why does the Torah actually give him the right to kill him? You see, the question is, perhaps, we find the concept by Yifat Torah that the Torah does not ask of something that he can't. That's very difficult. That's too difficult. And if the guy is going to be walking out of exile free, or when he's violating it, he's walking freely out of exile while his sentencing to be in exile, what do you think that family member is going to do to the guy? Do you think that the family member is going to stand there and just watch the guy violating his sentence? The guy's relative was killed as a result of this guy. And as we said, it wasn't a complete accident. It could have been avoided. He wasn't as careful as he could have been. So therefore, the Goel Hadam has some reason to be upset with him. It's not what it was. It's not like his relative ran in front of a car on a highway. It was that the relative that this Rotzeach could have been more careful. So now that that's the case, perhaps the Torah says that if I'm not going to allow the Goel Hadam to kill him if he leaves, he's most probably going to do it, and he's going to hit him. And once you start hitting a guy, he can kill him. He could kill the guy. So maybe, perhaps, the Torah gave that allowance, like the Torah told, Ki yecham levavo, his heart is hot. The guy is hot-headed as a result of such a thing. So maybe the Torah gave the right to him to do that, and that will also, what do you say, Mr. Zachary? And that will serve as a deterrent. It's like any time when the Torah gives a death penalty. Rav Moshe finds his letter to Governor Kerry. Is the point of Hashem giving a death penalty because Hashem wants to give a guy death? What's the point when Hashem gives certain punishments for all those mitzvahs in the Torah? Someone's B'chalal Shabbat, Chas v'shalom, gets motum, gets killed. All those things that he gets killed for. What's the purpose? Why the Torah gave the punishment? Is the purpose of the punishment? I would say the purpose of the punishment is because Hashem wants people not to go ahead and do the sin. Good morning, Dr. Navid. The punishment should serve as a deterrent. Look, here we are. We're on Galut. We're in exile for almost 2,000 years. All those punishments are not in play today. The court does not do capital punishment today in the Jewish community for the last 1,900 years or so. So Hashem gave us laws, and he gave us the consequence of a thing which doesn't apply today. And Hashem knew we're going to be in Galut, for how long we're going to be in Galut, and yet he decided to give us certain laws with certain punishments that they won't apply. A guy. So what's the point of Hashem telling us if a person dismisses Shabbat, he's going to get killed? He's not going to get killed today because there's no Beis Din. So how much is it serving a purpose? The answer is it's serving a great purpose. What's the great purpose?
Bigger reward.
Because then people won't do the sin because they know the seriousness, the severity of the sin. So I want to say, maybe to address your case, Mr. Safdie, also. The point of the Goel Adam having a right to kill the guy who leaves is going to serve as a deterrent. He's not going to leave. Who in their right mind knows that if someone has a right to kill him, who's going to leave exile when he knows that he might get killed? There's no police station there that we're holding the guy under lock and key. The guy who killed unintentionally. He's walking freely in the city of the Leviim. So maybe that could be the explanation of why the Torah gave an allowance for the Goel Hadam to kill the guy if he violates. You see, he can't walk into the city of refuge. The Goel Hadam has to stop. He walks into the city, he kills him. We warn him we're going to kill the Goel Hadam. It's not a free for all. So it gave limitations. Just like by the case of Yefat Torah. You want to marry her? You want to be with this non-Jewish woman? You have to first do this and you have to first do that. Shave her head and let her grow her nails, let it become disgusting. Only then did the Torah gave that allowance for the guy at war. Okay. Let's see the Gemara on Yud Aleph of the base. I just wanted to clarify, elaborate a drop on the last point of the Mishnah that we said on Yud Aleph of the base. The last point of the Mishnah said, which is a little bit what Mr. Safdie was talking about today. The Mishnah states the following. Rotzeach, on the first wide line. Rotzeach sheyasel chutz l'tchum. If the murderer left the boundaries, we said the 2,000 amot that are outside the city, if the murderer left that area, and we said because he's safe as long as he enters the city, or we call it the city limits or the boundaries, the 2,000 amot. But if he left those 2,000 amot and he left intentionally, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was leaving. It's not just by accident he left. He left intentionally. And the Goel Hadam found it. The relative found it. Rav Yossi Haglili Omer, mitzvah biyad Goel Hadam. There's a mitzvah for the Goel Hadam to kill him. Rishut, and there's a right biyad Kol Adam. And everyone has a right to kill him as well. Everyone does not have a mitzvah, but everyone has a right, which maybe we could say, like we were saying before, along the lines, the fact that everybody would have a right to kill him will serve as a great deterrent that he won't leave. Because he knows that anybody can kill him, not just the Goel Hadam. Anybody could kill him. So it's like the whole world is a police force, because the whole world could kill him. So who in their right mind, excuse the expression, would go ahead and leave? However, Bikiva says, Rishut biyad Goel Hadam. The Goel Hadam has a right to kill him. Not that there's a mitzvah. The Torah does not give a mitzvah for the Goel Hadam to kill this guy, even though he violated his terms. The Torah is not giving that mandate, that obligation to kill. The Torah is giving the right, the reshut. You have a right to kill. However, the Chol Adam chayav lo. And this text of the Mishnah is that any person who will kill the Rotzeach, any person who kills the guy who left the city of refuge, any person who does that will get killed for killing him. That meaning to say, you have no right to touch him. And if they're warned, they will get killed for killing this Rotzeach, even though the Rotzeach violated the terms of agreement that the Torah, I don't call terms of agreement, but the Torah is sentencing of staying in exile. Everybody will be chayavim alav. We never could kill anybody without being warned. So that means that anybody, we warn any guy, any Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, we tell Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, you can't kill this guy. Even though he's supposed to be in the city of refuge, even though he's violating his terms, does not give you the right to kill him. Now, the Girsah of the Mishnah is Chayavim Alav. You see Chayavim Alav, the Mishnah says? But you see there's a little Aleph by Chayavim Alav? So that takes you to should take you to the Vilna Gaon. You see the Vilna Gaon, Hagaot Hagra. It's bracketed. It's a bracketed Aleph. So do you see the Hagaot Hagra? Let me take a look in the art scroll. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good to have you back, Mike.
Thank you. Good to be back.
We are on Yud Aleph on the base. We are discussing now, the Mishnah has a text in our Mishnah. If someone left the exile, he was supposed to be in Golut. He killed unintentionally, but he intentionally violated his sentencing and he left the exile. So the Mishnah, one opinion in the Mishnah states that everybody has a right to kill him, meaning anybody who sees this guy leave the Orim Miklat intentionally has a right to kill him. That is Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. However, the Rabbi Akiva, his opinion in the Mishnah is, the text that we have, Chal Adam Chayavim Alav. Any person who kills him will be obligated death. Because nobody has a right to kill him. The only one who has a right to kill him is the Goel Hadam, nobody else. You're getting into this is a business that you should not be doing. It's not your business to kill him. The Goel Hadam wants to kill him, the Goel Hadam kill him. You have no right to kill him. And not only you have no right to kill him, if you kill him, the person who kills him will get killed for killing him. That is the text of the Mishnah. However, the Gra, the Vilna Gaon brings Mishnah v'chol adam ein chay. He has the text ein chayavim. You see the change of text, Mr. Safdie? Mishnah the Hagot HaGra v'chol adam ein chayavim, and not chayav. And he says v'cheinu b'tfus Yisharim. That's in the old text and the Mishnayos and Yerushalmi and all the Rishonim. And the text in front of us is based on the Marashal. So we have the Vilna Gaon says that the big lineup of most opinions, the old texts, he says the Mishnayot, the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, all the Rishonim have a different text in the Mishnah. And their text in the Mishnah...
Ein chayav for the Goel Adam?
No, for everybody else.
For Goel Adam. Okay, yeah.
Everybody, the Goel Adam, everybody agrees that there's no argument in the text of what Rabbi Akiva says about the Goel Adam. The Goel Adam has a right to kill. He has a license to kill, but not a mitzvah to kill.
And just everybody else.
Now we're discussing Mike and Navid. We're discussing everybody else. If a guy violated the terms and he left, so what is the ruling regarding everybody else? If everybody else, so Rabbi Akiva says, according to the change of the Vilna Gaon, is everybody else who would kill him, they will not be obligated death for killing him, but they're not allowed to do it. The word ein chayavim alav means they're not obligated death. It doesn't say mutar. It doesn't say rishut. They have a right to kill him. It's rather if they went in and they killed him, they do not get death for killing him. Meaning, if you warn everybody else, the rest of the world, we warn the whole world here. We find five guys. Five guys see the Goel Adam leave and they want to kill him. We warn all of them. You're not the Goel Adam. You have no right to kill him. If you can't do it, and they don't listen, they're not gonna get killed for it. They don't get killed for it. Ein chayav melav. That is the text according to the Vilna Gaon. I just want to say that there's a great advantage to this text, I'll tell you what the advantage is. Generally, when you have a machloket, when you have a dispute, the dispute is not so wide. The dispute is not so, the dispute is more, not as wide, not too extreme, so to speak. What do I mean to say? That to say that one opinion says that everybody has a right to kill, which is the opinion of Rishon Galili, and the next opinion says that everybody gets killed for it, is a very wide difference. But if you say that one opinion says everyone has a right to kill, and the other opinion says everyone doesn't have a right to kill, but not that we're going to kill, if they go ahead and they kill, they're not going to be obligated death. That's a shorter, we closed the difference a little bit. Meaning, if one guy says everyone has a right, and one guy says everybody will get killed, that's a very far difference of opinion. If you say one guy says you have a right, one guy says you don't have a right, but even the one who says you don't have a right does not say you get killed for it, so the dispute is a little less. That's just a great advantage. Just want to say hello to Mr. iPhone. Presume it's Morris, unless it's Jaime. We want to say hello. But the person is being very modest. Very modest. Okay. Morning, Morris. How are you? Okay. Let's see the Gemara. My time. Now the Gemara says, it's trying to explain this phenomenon. The Gemara, my time, Michael, looks like you have the Gemara, my timer. Third line in the wide lines. You got it? Yud Aleph on the base, 11b, third line in the wide lines, where it begins the Gemara. My timer. The Gemara wants to know what is the reason? What is the Gemara's question? The Gemara's question, we said that if there was a verdict of the court gave a verdict that he's obligated exile. And right after they gave a verdict, the Kohen Gadol passed away. After the verdict was issued. He never got to exile yet. There was a distance from the court to the city of the Levium. He never got to exile. The Mishnah says he goes home. He's free. He does not go to exile if the Kohen Gadol passed away post the verdict. There was a verdict, and as a result of the verdict, it's a humbling experience that a person hears the court says he's obligated to exile, and then the Kohen Gadol dies, he goes back home. That's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara wants to know my timer. What is the reason for this law? It's a very interesting law that the guy didn't make it to exile, just the death of the Kohen Gadol after the verdict. So the Gemara says, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Kal v'chomer. He has the principle, one of the 13 ways the Torah is nidreshet, is a Kal v'chomer. What's the Kal v'chomer? Says the following. Uma mi shegala kvar. Somebody who was already established in exile. So he's there. He was sentenced. He already moved there. He's in a city of exile. Yatsa akshav. Yet he leaves now with the death of the Kohen Gadol. Even though he's in prison, even though he's already living in this place, and he's in exile, but the death of the Kohen Gadol has the power to remove him, to uproot him from his place of refuge where he is. That's the power. That's what happens as a result of the death of the Kohen Gadol. So mi shelo gala, someone who did not yet go to exile, he's not there. So certainly the Gemara says, Eino din shelo yigla, certainly the death of the Kohen Gadol should be able to get him out. The death of the Kohen Gadol could take a guy who was already there and pull him out. So certainly the Gemara says somebody who was not there yet, he should be able to stop him from having to go there. That is the Kal v'chomer of the Gemara. Oh,
Rabbi, where's
so
the
Mr.
stringency in that? Yeah.
Okay, very good. So I think Navid and Mr. Safdie are bothered by the following question. They're bothered by the following question. If the guy, maybe the guy who went to exile, who sat some time in prison, so to speak, in this type, it's not a prison, in a city of refuge, maybe he, at the death of the Kohen Gadol, leaves. But the guy who never sat a day in prison, in exile, maybe the death of the Kohen Gadol will not take him out. Is that what you're also asking, Navid, or are you asking something else?
Yeah, I just don't see the stringency in how much more so that the guy who never went in should never go in.
Right. That's really, you're really asking that's what the Gemara is going to ask.
Right.
That's what the Gemara is going to ask right now. The Gemara says,
And it's not a kol v'chomer?
right, so that's what the Gemara, let's see what the Gemara is going to say. The Gemara is going to say, V'dilma, perhaps, Hai digala ichapale. The guy that went to exile, he got kapara, he got atonement because he spent time in the city of refuge. But the guy who did not sit any time in exile, the logala, that the guy who did not sit, never went to exile, low. Maybe he did not have any atonement yet. So therefore, we should say maybe the death of the Kohen Gadol should not take him out of the responsibility to go to exile. Meaning, how could you say, because if the guy who already sat in exile goes out free, certainly the guy who did not sit in. Maybe the opposite. The guy who sat in exile, maybe he goes out free with the death of the Kohen Gadol because he sat, he put in time. He had kapara, he had atonement by sitting in exile. But the guy who never sat in exile, maybe he needs to go to exile.
He also got the kapara of the judgment, we said.
Right, he got the kapara of the judgment, but he didn't spend one day in the city of exile compared to the other guy. That's true, Mike. But the other guy sat, he might have sat a year, he might have sat however long he sat. So maybe the fact that guy goes out free with the death of the Kohen Gadol, but maybe the guy who
the death of the death of the Kohen Gadol was his kapara, the death of the Sadiq. No?
Okay. So the question is very good. So the Gemara is going to again. So we're going to discuss about that kind of it says in a minute. But we're going to get the Gemara. We're going to see the answer to the Gemara. Then we're going to get to the Tosfot. So the Gemara's question is on Abaye's Kal V'chomer. How could you tell me that if the guy who was in exile leaves, certainly he didn't go to exile leaves? How do you say that? Maybe the guy who was in exile leaves because he already spent time in exile. Or maybe the guy who was not in exile, maybe he needs to go to exile. Maybe the death of the Kohen Gadol is not enough of a kapara because he didn't spend any time. So what does the Gemara shoot back? So the Gemara shoots back, Mide galut kamachapra? Is it the exile that brings the atonement? Midat hakohen umachapra. It's the death of the Kohen that brings the kapara. And since that death of the Kohen is the one that it has the power, is the battery to get the guy out of exile. So if the death of the Kohen Gadol has such a power to take a guy who's already in exile, and the guy was exiled already, that has the power to get him out of exile. So certainly the death has the power to get the guy, to prevent the guy from going into exile. If it has such power to take a guy out, it should definitely have the power to go ahead and prevent him from going in, because it's much harder to get somebody out of somewhere who is not there yet You know, it's like, you know what? You want to talk to the political official. You talk to the politician. Could you get this guy out of jail? Is he sitting in jail? Very hard to get him out of jail. The guy who never sat in jail yet, okay, it's easier to work. We can easily get the guy out and prevent him from going into jail because he's not in jail. We could get we waste we'll let him do community service. Let him do, you want to take a guy out? That's the hardest deal to do. So therefore, that's what the Gemara is saying. If the Kohen Gadol has the power, if the Kohen Gadol's death has the power to take a guy out when he's already in, certainly if the guy never got in yet, the power of the Kohen Gadol should be able to take him out of exile. That's the Kal V'chomer, and that's why he doesn't have to spend a day in exile. But Tosfot asked the following question. Tosfot goes back to our Gemara on Beis Amid Beis, early in the Masechta, back in the beginning, where Tosfot says that our Gemara indicates, our Gemara indicates that exile is a kapara. Meaning, we just said now, if you read the Gemara, the text of the Gemara is Midi Galut Kamachapra. Is it Galut that is doing the atonement? It's the Mitat Kohen who's the Machapra, right? The Gemara says, what is bringing the atonement? The death of the Kohen is bringing the atonement. But Tosfos has a problem.
That's the trigger, Rabbi. That's the answer.
The trigger, like you were saying before, Dr. David, what did you say?
That's the trigger. It's not that the guy spent the time in the city of refuge. The trigger is that the guy had a judgment, okay? And once the Kohen Gadol passes away, then everybody that's their
freedom,
free card.
The ticket. That's the free card. That exactly, that's what the Gemara says. But Tosfos has a question, Mike. And by the way, what you said is true, and we're going to see Tosfos' answer. Is going to say a little about what you're saying. Tosfos has a question, but what did we do with the Gemara earlier? We have a Gemara that mentions the idea that exile serves as a kapara. That the Gemara says that for some people exile will be enough of a kapara, and some people exile is not enough of a kapara. Right? A guy who killed without a warning, without being warned, exile is not going to be enough of a kapara. But a guy who killed unintentionally, the exile will be a kapara. So the Gemara earlier talks about the idea of exile being a kapara for the man. And so how does the Gemara here say that what's the kapara is the death of the Kohen Gadol, and it says that the galut is not the kapara. When we see from the Gemara earlier that the galut, spending time in exile, is the kapara. That is the Gemara's Tosfos' question. So Tosfos gives an answer, a beautiful answer. Bet Amid Bet, yeah.
Have a good one.
If you look at the Gemara, the Gemara says on Beis Amid Beis, it says towards the top of the page. The Gemara had a question. If witnesses frame somebody on exile, right? Witnesses frame somebody, they said somebody's obligated exile, and then they were found to be framers. So we say we don't do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy, but rather we give the witnesses lashes, Makkos. And the Gemara on Beis Amid Beis wanted to know what is the reason for that. So first the Gemara says, because we have a pasuk, right? There's 4 lines from the top. Then the Gemara, then Rabbi Yochanan said, I have a Kal V'chomer. Rabbi Yochanan says, a guy who did an action b'mezid, if a guy did an action, a guy killed without a warning, he doesn't go to exile, so they that they did not kill with an act, they did not kill, they just said words, certainly they shouldn't go to exile. A guy who actually killed someone doesn't go to exile. The guy who killed without warning doesn't go to exile. So they who framed somebody who didn't do an action certainly shouldn't go to exile. So the Gemara says no. Piano said it. Who shall some mice have been made? A guy who did an action intentionally killed a guy without a warning. So maybe he doesn't go to Galut. And why? Because it's not going to be a kapara. But they that do not do an action intentionally, maybe they should go to Galut in order there should be a kapara. The exile should be a kapara. So we see, and the Gemara comes said, therefore the best answer is the other answer. But the Gemara, we see from the Gemara earlier that exile is the kapara. And yet our Gemara says that what's the kapara? The death of the Kohen Gadol. That is Tosaf's question. How could our Gemara say it's all about Mike's battery that Mike spoke about, the death of the Kohen Gadol? We see the kapara is the person being, there's a concept of kapara for the guy being in exile, right? Am I clear? So Tosaf says the following amazing answer. Here, Tosaf on the right side. Look at the Tosfot. Look at the Tosfot. Midi galut kamachapra. You have the Tosfot, Morris on the right
Rabbi,
side.
the question, whose question is this? So the question is basically that the fact that the murderer, not intentionally, is not going to the city of refuge, is not going there. We're saying why he didn't have his kaparata.
Right, he didn't have kapara, so therefore maybe he needs to go to the city of refuge. But the other guy who sat there, maybe that's why he leaves, because he had kapara, because he spent time in the city of refuge.
So the fact that the Kohen Gadol is passed away and that they give him, he's free. Is that the Mishnah, or that's the Gemara, or that's an opinion, or what is it that we're talking about? Is that what it is, and we're arguing on that?
Very good. So the Mishnah stated the following. The Mishnah states that if there is a verdict and the verdict says guilty, you have to go to exile, and then the Kohen Gadol passes away, even though the guy did not spend a day, a minute in exile, he's free. That was the chidush of the Mishnah.
Got it.
Abaye came up with a kal v'chomer to explain what's the source for this reason, and he said he has this logical reasoning called kal v'chomer.
Kal v'chomer, okay.
And then the Gemara questioned the kal v'chomer, and then the Gemara says no, there's no question on the kal v'chomer, because it's the death of the Kohen Gadol that does the trick. It's not about the sitting in exile as the kapara, and it's the death of the Kohen Gadol.
And then Tosfot comes and say, how can you tell me that is the death of the Kohen Gadol, since on that example that we just said with the Edim, that the kapara is the going to exile. Right.
Tosfos is quoting the Gemara earlier. Correct. That was Tosfos' question. Right. If you want to look at the Tosfot, it's a beautiful little Tosfot. Maybe we'll take a little focus on the Tosfot. Morris, you got it on the right side. Dr. Navid, the headline. When you learn a Tosfot, the first thing you do is you focus on the headline of Tosfot. It's called the Dibur HaMatchil. That's called the beginning. You'll see a lot of times in the Gemara, Dr. Navid, Dalit, then two little lines at the top, Hey. Dalit Hey stands for Dibur HaMatchil, the word that begins. What do you say? We'll start with the beginning of the Tosfot. Do you have it? No, we're back to Yud Aleph on the bed. Tosfot is going to quote our Gemara that we just did, Mustafti. You have the bottom Tosfot, Midi Galut Kamachapra. Tema. Tosfot says, I have a wonder. Eina Chinami. Again, I'm sorry, I didn't follow what I just said. Headline of Tosfot, let's explain the headline. Before you jump into a Tosfot, you got to explain the headline. What's the headline? Midi Galut Kamach, that's in bold. Midi Galut Kamachapra. Is Galut, the Gemara says, is Galut, is the exile that you told me? It's not the exile. It's what? It's the death of the Kohen Gadol. So it says Tema. Ever wondered? Einachinami. No, it is true. Yes, it is the Golut is the kapara. The Gemara said, is Golut the kapara? So it says, yes, it is. Tema ein hachinami. Yes, it is. Mid'ama b'reish mechiltin. We said in the beginning of our tractate, our Masechta, on Bet Amabez, Haim shalo asu ma'aseh. The witnesses that didn't do an action, they merely framed the guy with their speech. Likalu, they should go to exile. Why? That's what the Gemara asked there. In order that it should be a kapara, they should have an atonement. Alma, we see golut mechaperet. We see from the Gemara earlier that exile serves as an atonement. Alma, we see golut mechaperet, kapara. It serves as an atonement. So how can our Gemara say it's golut mechaper? Is the golut atonement? What do you mean the Gemara earlier said it is atonement? Morris, is it clear? So listen to Tosfos.
Rabbi, maybe it's different sins. Maybe it's different sins because one guy, his sin is that he killed unintentionally, and the edim and the false edim, it's a different sin. They need the kapara. They need the kapara on the false witnesses, and the guy who killed unintentionally needs the kapara on that. So the kapara when he killed unintentionally is the death of the Kohen Gadol. That's his kapara. That's his ticket out. But the edim, their kapara is to have what they wished for others to do. So what they wish that the guy goes to exile. So then they going to exile. Does it make sense?
I hear what you're saying, but the fact that we would use exile as an atonement for him, the false witnesses, so it should also be able to serve, for the guy who killed unintentionally, also as an atonement. Once we found the concept, I like your chiluk, Mike, but once we find that the Gemara says on Beis and Beis that exile could be used as an atonement for those framers, the Gemara was thinking, it was asking that, why don't we use it? So it should also be used as for an atonement for a person killed unintentionally. Perhaps that's why Tosfos doesn't go with that route, and it goes with a different route.
But it is a kapara. It is a kapara in 99% of the cases. That's 1% of the cases what we're talking about.
Okay. But Tosfos gives a different approach, Mike.
Okay.
But Dr. Nevir, I just want to clarify because Dr. Nevir bring out a point. The Gemara's conclusion there is that the Edom Zomim who frame someone on exile, they don't go to exile. But the Gemara said, when the Gemara was trying to figure that out, how do we know that? The Gemara first wanted to say we know it from a Kal V'chomer, and the Gemara says that Kal V'chomer would not be a good Kal V'chomer because they should go, without a special pasuk, we would say they go to Galut because the Galut would serve as an atonement. The only reason why they don't go to Galut because we have a pasuk that says the Huyanus, he runs to Galut, only a murderer runs to exile. Nobody else runs to exile. Nobody else. If you frame someone, you don't go to exile. But the Gemara, in its point, on its way to getting to that final point, said that if without that pasuk, we would have said he would have gone to exile because exile would have served as a point as atonement. So we see, even though it actually doesn't practically, but it would have. So we see exile serves as an atonement. Good morning. So the Gemara says, the Yesh Loma, so Tosfos answer, now in the end of Tosfos. The Hacha Kapara Lepatro Migalut Kama. It's a little bit what Mike was saying before but in a different direction, a little bit. Kapara Lepatro Migalut, but it's also what Mike said earlier about the Kapara. What is the battery to take him out of exile? You could have a kapara for a person. A person kills someone unintentionally. He sits in exile. You know why he needs to sit in exile? He needs kapara. The sitting in exile will serve as a kapara. But What is the main battery to get him out of exile? What is the big card? What is the power, the bomb to get him out of exile? What's the big key? Is the death of the Kohen Gadol. So even though his sitting in exile serves as an atonement, that's what the Gemara says early in the Masechta. Kapara, when you sit in exile, it's a kapara. But what really gets you out of, good morning, what really gets you out of exile is the death of the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, Tosfos says, that's what our Gemara is saying. Our Gemara is talking about getting out of exile. And the Gemara says the key to get out of exile is death of the Kohen Gadol. And Tosfos proves his point. A guy sat in exile. One guy sits in exile for one day, morning. One guy can sit in exile for 50 years. What gets him out? What gets him out is the death. This guy, the death of the Kohen Gadol happened after one day. He's now free. This guy had to wait 50 years for the death of the Kohen Gadol. Yeah, but like Mr. Safdie said, one of the Rishonim said, but that's what each guy needed. It's not Hashem wanted that this guy should sit 50 years. He was going to sit one day. But it's true they went in. It's true he went in. But the fact that we see that it's the death of the Kohen Gadol, which is that's the shaker and the breaker, or whatever the expression. He's the mover. He's the power man.
That's the rule. That's it.
That's true, right? But what? Right, and this guy had enough of a cleanser of being up there. But it's true he went in, but because to hear also, that's what one of the Rishonim say. By hearing the sentence that he's obligated galut, that in itself would serve as a humbling experience. Even itself, because subsequently the Kohen Gadol died, he had a sentence against him. How do you like that, Mr. Safdie? I guess a good curveball. And therefore, but what's the main thing to get him out of exile? The death of the Kohen Gadol. So therefore, the Kavachom is bad. If the guy who was already in exile, the death of the Kohen Gadol had the power to get him out of exile, the guy who was never in exile certainly doesn't have to go into exile. We'll see everybody tomorrow. How do you like that? Tosfos? Yeah, you got to take it out.
Rabbi, beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much. So the Edim, they're not going. The Edim is not the kapara to go to exile.
The Edim don't right. They have something else. They would have had the kapara. They would have went to exile to have kapara. And the only reason why we know, because there's a special pasuk that says that even though they framed them, the special pasuk says that Golut exile is only reserved for a person who killed unintentionally. If a person did another sin, like he framed somebody on exile, the witnesses wanted to send someone to exile. They didn't kill anybody. They wanted to send someone to exile. The Torah says you don't go to exile for wanting someone to go to exile. Even though there's a general rule, is you do to the witnesses what they wanted to do to the other guy. They wanted to obligate a guy $1,000 and they were found to be framers, they pay $1,000. But when it comes to exile, this punishment of exile is reserved specifically for people who killed unintentionally. So even for people who frame someone on exile, they cannot go to, that's not what the Torah wants the punishment to be for them, that they should go to exile. And those framers will have to get lashes, Makkos. That's what they're going to say.
Beautiful. Rabbi, thank you so much.
Thank you for being on, Mike. You see, you come on, it's a different class. It's a different, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.